9/11. This one started as an ordinary workday, and that normalcy is what made the collapse so total. Offices filled, planes lifted off, coffee was poured, meetings were scheduled. No sirens, no warnings, just routine moving at full speed. 19 hijackers boarded 4 commercial flights after passing through standard airport security. Within minutes of takeoff, control of the planes was gone. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 17 minutes later, United Flight 175 hit the South Tower. Millions watched live as smoke poured out and confusion spread across the country. Inside the buildings, stairwells filled with people moving down through darkness and heat. First responders moved upward into floors that were already burning. Some, trapped above the impact zones, made phone calls they knew might be final. At 9:37 a.m., a third plane hit the Pentagon, turning the attack into a national siege. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. The North Tower followed at 10:28. The skyline vanished into dust. Nearly 3,000 people were killed, including civilians, firefighters, police officers, and flight crews. The fourth plane, United Flight 93, crashed in Pennsylvania after passengers attempted to regain control. The immediate damage ended in hours. The consequences did not. Air travel shut down nationwide. Emergency laws expanded surveillance. Wars followed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Trauma spread through responders, families, and survivors who would spend decades living with illness, loss, and unanswered questions. The attackers died that morning. The world they changed never went back. Titanic. The ship was supposed to prove that modern engineering had conquered risk. It was marketed as unsinkable, designed to dominate the Atlantic, and built to showcase the confidence of an industrial age that believed technology could outpace nature. By April 1912, that confidence was on full display. The ship departed Southampton carrying more than 2,200 passengers and crew, divided sharply by class. First-class travelers lived in luxury. Third-class families were kept below decks behind gates and corridors that reflected how society was organized even at sea. Lifeboats were included, though not nearly enough for everyone on board. Regulations hadn't caught up to ship size, and no one expected to need them anyway. As the Titanic crossed the North Atlantic, multiple ice warnings were received from other ships. The messages were noted and then set aside. The vessel continued at near top speed through ice-filled waters. Late on April 14th, the lookout spotted an iceberg too late to fully avoid it. The collision felt minor to many passengers. Below the waterline, it was fatal. The iceberg tore open multiple compartments, and the ship's design could not survive that kind of damage. Water spread steadily. Orders were given to prepare lifeboats, though confusion and disbelief slowed everything down. When evacuation began, priority went to women and children. Though enforcement varied by deck and officer, many lifeboats were lowered half full. Third-class passengers struggled to reach the upper decks in time. At 2:20 a.m., the ship broke apart and disappeared beneath the ocean. More than 1,500 people died in the freezing water. Most lifeboats never returned to help. Literally, the Titanic failed because everyone believed it couldn't fail. Challenger explosion. The Challenger didn't fail because of a sudden accident, but because the decision to launch had already overridden the warnings. By January 1986, the mission was framed as routine, proof that spaceflight had become safe, predictable, and ready for television. The launch carried extra pressure. Challenger was set to carry Krista McAuliffe, a civilian schoolteacher chosen to broadcast lessons from orbit. Millions of students were watching live. NASA wanted the launch to succeed on schedule, despite delays and public attention building around the event. On the night before liftoff at Cape Canaveral, engineers from contractor Morton Thiokol warned that cold temperatures could compromise rubber O-rings sealing the solid rocket boosters. These rings were known to lose flexibility in low temperatures. The forecast showed freezing conditions. The warning didn't stop the launch. At 11:38 a.m. on January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off. 73 seconds later, a plume of flame escaped from a booster joint. Structural failure followed almost instantly. The shuttle broke apart in front of a live audience, killing all 7 crew members. Debris rained into the Atlantic. Viewers were told to stay calm as controllers initially struggled to understand what they were seeing. There was no explosion inside the cabin. The crew likely remained conscious during the fall. Investigations later revealed what the engineers had already known. Safety concerns had been normalized. Risk had become paperwork. Management pressure had overridden technical judgment. The Challenger exploded after warnings were ignored. Chernobyl. The event was supposed to prove control. Soviet engineers wanted to run a late-night safety test to see whether a nuclear reactor could power its own cooling systems during a shutdown. The test had been delayed all day, pressure was mounting, and no one wanted to report failure. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was pushed into unstable conditions. Operators disabled safety systems to keep the test running. Power dropped too low, then it surged. Within seconds, a massive explosion tore the reactor apart, blowing off the roof and exposing the core directly to the atmosphere. Radiation poured into the night sky. Firefighters arrived without protective gear, unaware they were standing next to an open nuclear reactor. Some picked up glowing chunks of graphite with their bare hands. Many would be dead within weeks. Others suffered burns and radiation sickness that destroyed their bodies from the inside. Authorities hesitated. The nearby city of Pripyat was not evacuated for 36 hours. Children played outside while radioactive dust settled on playgrounds. When buses finally arrived, residents were told they would be gone for a few days. Most never returned. The fallout spread across Europe. Crops were destroyed, animals were buried, entire regions were sealed off. The Soviet government initially denied the scale of the disaster until radiation alarms went off in Sweden, forcing international exposure. Thousands of liquidators were sent in to contain the damage, many with minimal protection. They shoveled radioactive debris, built a concrete sarcophagus, and absorbed doses that shortened their lives. The true death toll remains disputed, buried under secrecy and politics. Chernobyl failed when silence overruled safety. Bhopal went to sleep trusting a factory that was already falling apart. For years, safety systems at a pesticide plant had been shut down, ignored, or quietly disabled to cut costs. The danger sat in storage tanks, invisible and undocumented, waiting for the wrong moment. Shortly after midnight on December 3, 1984, water entered a tank holding methyl isocyanate, a highly toxic chemical used to make pesticides. A violent chemical reaction followed. Pressure rose fast. Safety systems failed or weren't working. At around 12:40 a.m., a cloud of poison burst into the air and drifted straight toward the city of Bhopal. People woke up choking, eyes burned, lungs filled. Entire families ran blindly through the streets, coughing up foam and collapsing as they fled. The gas hugged the ground, seeping into homes, hospitals, and slums. Animals died where they stood. Trains passed through a city already filling with bodies. By morning, thousands were dead. The exact number remains disputed. Official counts list a few thousand immediate deaths, while independent estimates suggest many more. Over the following years, tens of thousands suffered long-term damage, blindness, lung disease, birth defects, and neurological injuries. Children were born sick long after the gas faded from the air. The company responsible, Union Carbide, denied full responsibility and released limited information about the gas, slowing medical treatment. Executives avoided prison. Compensation was delayed, reduced, and widely criticized as inadequate. The plant was abandoned, leaving behind contaminated soil and groundwater that still poisoned surrounding neighborhoods. No emergency plan existed, no warning system was in place, no evacuation instructions were given. Bhopal exposed the cost of ignoring safeguards. 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami. This one didn't announce itself with alarms or countdowns. It arrived as a consequence already locked in, triggered by a force so large it reshaped the planet before anyone along the coast understood what was coming. On December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake ruptured the seafloor off the coast of Sumatra. It was one of the strongest earthquakes ever recorded, caused by a massive shift between tectonic plates. The ocean floor lifted violently, displacing billions of tons of water in minutes. Energy radiated outward in all directions, invisible in deep water and unstoppable. Along the shores of Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Thailand, and beyond, the sea behaved strangely. In some places it pulled back, exposing the seabed. People walked out to look. Fishermen stood still. Children followed the water. There was no regional warning system to explain what that retreat meant. When the waves hit, they didn't behave like surf. Walls of water slammed into coastlines at highway speeds, smashing buildings, sweeping away vehicles, and crushing entire towns. In places like Banda Aceh, neighborhoods disappeared in minutes. Families were separated instantly. Many victims drowned far inland, trapped in debris-filled floods with nowhere to run. The tsunami crossed the entire Indian Ocean, striking Africa hours later. By the time the water settled, more than 230,000 people were dead across 14 countries. Millions were displaced. Bodies were buried in mass graves to prevent disease. Entire fishing economies collapsed overnight. The tragedy exposed how vulnerable the region had been. The Pacific had warning systems. The Indian Ocean did not. That absence turned a natural event into a human catastrophe. The ocean didn't choose its victims. Silence did. Hiroshima. The city was chosen because it could show results clearly. Military planners wanted a target that had not already been destroyed, a place where the effects could be measured without interference. So, on the morning of August 6, 1945, the city woke up unaware it had been selected to demonstrate a new kind of power. At 8:15 a.m., the American B-29 bomber Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb over Hiroshima. The device detonated roughly 600 meters above the city center. In less than a second, temperatures near the blast reached levels hotter than the surface of the sun. Buildings vaporized. People closest to the explosion were killed instantly, leaving only shadows burned into walls and pavement. A shockwave followed, flattening most of the city. Fires ignited everywhere at once, merging into a massive firestorm that consumed neighborhoods and oxygen alike. Survivors wandered through ruins with burned skin hanging from their bodies, blinded, dehydrated, and desperate for water. Many who escaped the blast would die hours or days later from injuries they didn't yet understand. By the end of 1945, an estimated 140,000 people were dead. Hospitals were destroyed, doctors were killed, and medical supplies were almost non-existent. Radiation sickness appeared slowly, confusing both victims and rescuers. Hair fell out. Internal bleeding followed. Children were born years later with severe deformities. The bombing helped push Japan towards surrender and marked the beginning of the nuclear age. It also proved that a single weapon could annihilate an entire city in moments, with suffering that stretched across generations. Hiroshima showed the world what winning at any cost actually looks like. Nagasaki. After Hiroshima was destroyed on August 6, 1945, Japanese leadership debated surrender while trying to understand what had just happened. Before that debate could settle, a second decision was already in motion. On August 9, 1945, the American B-29 boxcar took off carrying another atomic bomb. The original target was Kokura, but cloud cover blocked visibility. With fuel running low, the crew diverted to their secondary target, Nagasaki, an industrial city surrounded by hills and valleys. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb detonated roughly 500 meters above the city. The terrain limited some of the blast, sparing parts of Nagasaki from total flattening. That geography also concentrated destruction into narrow zones. Factories, homes, churches, and civilians vanished within seconds. Thousands died instantly. Many more were burned, crushed, or exposed to lethal radiation. Survivors emerged into a landscape that barely resembled a city. Fires spread through ruins. Hospitals were overwhelmed or destroyed. Medical staff had no understanding of radiation sickness as people who appeared stable collapsed days later. Skin blistered, hair fell out, internal bleeding followed without visible wounds. By the end of 1945, an estimated 70,000 people were dead. Radiation-related illnesses would continue to kill for decades. Entire families disappeared without records. Entire neighborhoods were erased without photographs. Hiroshima showed the weapon worked. Nagasaki showed it would be used again. Armenian genocide. This one began as a security measure on paper. As the Ottoman Empire entered World War I, its leaders claimed that Armenian communities posed an internal threat. What followed was framed as relocation. What it became was annihilation. In 1915, Ottoman authorities ordered the mass deportation of Armenians from their homes in Anatolia. Families were given little notice. Men were often separated first, disarmed, and killed. Women, children, and the elderly were forced into convoys and marched south toward the Syrian desert with minimal food, water, or protection. The routes were deliberate. Deportation columns were pushed through harsh terrain where survival depended on supplies that never came. Guards allowed starvation, disease, and exhaustion to do most of the work. Along the way, mass killings occurred openly. Villages vanished. Entire communities were erased without records. Many deportees were sent to camps near Deir ez-Zor, where conditions ensured death rather than shelter. Survivors described bodies lining roads, children collapsing from thirst, and families disappearing overnight. Local officials often participated. Others looked away. Few intervened. By the end of the campaign, an estimated 1 to 1.5 million Armenians were dead. Churches were destroyed. Property was seized. Survivors scattered across the world, forming a diaspora built from loss rather than migration. After the war, accountability faded. Some perpetrators escaped punishment. Others reintegrated into political life. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and responsibility dissolved into denial. To this day, the Turkish government rejects the term genocide, despite overwhelming historical evidence. The genocide relied on distance, exhaustion, and the certainty that no one would stop it. The Holocaust. It unfolded through organization before it reached slaughter. The Nazi state turned hatred into procedure, using forms, records, and laws to isolate Jews from public life. After Adolf Hitler took power in 1933, businesses were seized, professions were closed, and citizenship was stripped away. Families were forced into ghettos sealed by walls, guards, and starvation. As World War II expanded eastward, the killing escalated. Mobile execution units followed German armies into Eastern Europe, emptying towns through mass shootings and unmarked graves. By 1942, extermination became industrial. Camps such as Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, and Sobibor processed arrivals by the trainload. Selection took minutes. Gas chambers did the rest. Bodies were burned to erase evidence and maintain efficiency. When Allied forces arrived, 6 million Jews were dead, along with millions of others deemed disposable. Survivors emerged alone, sick, and stripped of family, identity, and home. The Holocaust was mass murder perfected through bureaucracy. Rwandan genocide. In just 100 days, ordinary life collapsed into coordinated killing carried out by neighbors, co-workers, and local officials. How? Well, decades of political manipulation and colonial division had hardened tensions between Hutu and Tutsi communities. By the early 1990s, extremist propaganda filled the airwaves, naming enemies and giving instructions. On April 6, 1994, the president's plane was shot down near Kigali. Within hours, roadblocks appeared. Identity cards became death sentences. Militias moved door to door, often guided by radio broadcasts. Churches and schools turned into execution sites. Refusal to participate marked you as a target. Weapons were basic. Machetes and clubs did most of the work. The international response collapsed almost immediately. Peacekeepers stood down. Foreign governments evacuated their own and left. By July, around 800,000 people were dead. The violence stopped only when the killers were defeated. Bengal famine. Interestingly, this famine was not caused by drought, flood, or invasion. In 1943, British-ruled Bengal faced rising prices, crop disruption from a cyclone the previous year, and wartime panic after Japan captured Burma. Rice markets destabilized. Speculation spread. Poor families were priced out first. Rural laborers lost income and began migrating towards cities in search of food that wasn't there. As conditions worsened, officials on the ground warned of mass starvation. Grain was requested. Shipping was requested. Emergency relief was requested. London delayed. Food was diverted to stockpiles and military priorities across the empire. Boats were confiscated along the coast to prevent a possible Japanese invasion, cutting fishing communities off from their livelihoods. Starvation became visible in Calcutta. People collapsed in the streets. Children begged beside bodies. Entire villages emptied. Disease followed hunger, turning malnutrition into death. Hospitals overflowed. Relief kitchens were overwhelmed or never reached rural areas where death was most severe. The colonial government restricted press coverage and minimized reports. Deaths went uncounted. Officials blamed inflation, hoarding, and population pressure. Responsibility scattered upward until it vanished. By the time policy shifted and imports increased, the damage was irreversible. Estimates vary, but historians commonly cite around 3 million deaths. Families were erased without records. Survivors carried trauma long after the war ended. The famine reshaped Indian politics, accelerating demands for independence and exposing the human cost of imperial priorities. Bengal starved because control mattered more than lives.